Hey everybody. So for the next few videos, or at least this will be probably run for a good 3 videos or so. I don't know if these next 2 videos will be posted right after this one. But what I plan on doing is specifically for this one, as you might have seen in the title, I'm going to do my top 10 favorite films of the 1970s decade. And then my next 2 videos are going to be the best films of the 1980s and the best films of the 1990s. Just the top 10, of course, because there's a lot of great films that came out in all 3 of these decades. Um, so to get started, let's start with number 10 going on up to 1. Just like all my top 10 or all my top 5 lists, I start at the bottom and I work my way up. The further we go up, the better I feel the film is. And also with this list, I also want to make sure that people know that um, basically I also ranked these based not only because I feel these are the best in my opinion, but I feel that whenever I think of this decade, since this is the '70s, whenever I think of the 1970s in film, these are the top 10 films that come to mind. So I kind of base it off of how much does it make me think of the 1970s when I hear about that film or I watch it. So I also base it off that. So like for those who might have seen my top 100 films list, if any of these titles are in higher ranking from another film and on the top 100 list, it might be a ranking higher if it's lower on the list. That was because I based that off of when I think of the 1970s, I more so think of that film than that other film that might have some of you might think might have been a little bit higher. Um, so let's get started with the list. At number 10, we have American Graffiti. I really love this film, you guys, and I know a lot of other people do also. It was kind of the film that George Lucas was kind of allowed to make Star Wars through because, before nobody really knew who George Lucas was. So this was kind of the film that set the ground of what he can bring to the table as a filmmaker. It was kind of this, I think it was early 60s coming of age kind of film. Richard Dreyfuss was in this. This is one of Harrison Ford's first films. Really, really well done. I think it really depicts the time period it's trying to depict really well. Like I said, I think it's the early 60s, but it may be the late 50s as well. I'm pretty sure it's the early 60s, though. But it portrays it perfectly. Whenever I think of the 60s, I think of what American Graffiti was like and, how people kind of lived and, what, kids of that age did it late at night based off what that film told me. So, really good movie. At number 9, we have 007, The Man with the Golden Gun. This is easily one of my favorite James Bond movies. I would put this up there with, Dr. No and GoldenEye and Skyfall, Die Another Day. Really, really good Bond film. Definitely one of Roger Moore's better outings as James Bond. Christopher Lee, as Scaramanga. I mean, who can forget that? I mean, it was really, really well done. I like that little maze that Roger Moore and Christopher Lee played with each other in that movie. Really, really well done. Once again, I think of the 1970s when I think of that movie. At number 8, we have Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This is kind of our first exposure to Steven Spielberg taking on science fiction. He was big with Jaws by then. A really, really well done film. You could definitely tell he liked working with Richard Dreyfuss back then because, he worked with him in Jaws previously. Another really good science fiction movie. I mean, we got kind of a neat approach on aliens. I like how he was building those little mountains and little piles all the time because he was thinking about that mountain that was significant later in the movie. Just a really, really well done film. It's just one of those films where you really feel engaged in what you're watching as you watch it. So another film that makes me think of the '70s. At number 7, we have Rocky 2. One thing because I know I've talked about Rocky thousands of times on this channel, and for those who've watched my Facebook videos for a while too. But one thing I like about Rocky 2 that not a lot of people talk about, I kind of like how Rocky tried to move away from boxing in this movie. He tried to work jobs. He tried to do different things. Adrian really wanted him to move on to something else. Of course, it was still a boxing movie, but I liked how in this film, more so than the first one, we kind of got what Rocky would be like if he wasn't a boxer. What would it be like if he really did retire from boxing, like he was talking about at the end of the first film, and just kind of lived the life that wasn't related to boxing at all. Um, so that's one thing I really like about that film, and I also like the ending too, with the final moments of the boxing match with the rematch of Apollo Creed. Really, really intense moment. I always at the edge of my seat whenever I watch that scene. So really, really good 1970s film. At number 6, we have Apocalypse Now. For those who know me really well, this is easily one of my favorite war films of all time. Francis Ford Coppola not only gave us a good Vietnam War depiction, he managed to do something interesting with the material. I liked how it was kind of this ritual sacrifice kind of movie. Marlon Brando gave a great performance in this. I kind of like the voiceover in this. My crew and I went down the jungle. We saw water. We saw trees. We were looking for that general, that son of a bitch. I really like that voice that you hear throughout the movie. Um, at number 5, we have Halloween by John Carpenter. Um, I watch this film every year for Halloween. I watch this film at least once a year. It's just one of those kind of movies. John Carpenter, that movie goes to show that you can make a really great film with a very few dollars. I mean, it's just such a intense, music driven, dialogue driven. It's just such a great, the setting of it is great. It was just so simplified, but yet so brilliant, and I think that's why I love it so much. So at number 5 is Halloween. At number 4, and this isn't going to surprise a lot of people because it's probably one of their favorites for the 1970s as well, is Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. This is definitely a film where, when I first thought of doing a top 10 favorites for the 70s, I'm like, I can't do it without mentioning Star Wars. I mean, this film, it revolutionized so many things. It definitely revolutionized, kind of the special effects standard that Hollywood can provide to people. It definitely revolutionized where sci-fi was going at the time. It started the career of Harrison Ford. Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill had careers after this movie, but they weren't as big as Harrison Ford's later became, or George Lucas's. So number 4 was Star Wars Episode 4. At number 3, we have Enter the Dragon. One thing I love about Enter the Dragon, this is back when Bruce Lee was alive. At least he was alive around the time this film was made. He died shortly after this film was released to the U.S., so we never personally got to see his stardom while he was alive, at least in the U.S. anyway. But yeah, Enter the Dragon, I love how that movie goes to show that, in action movies, you don't need this big CGI, big special effects needed for movies like this. I mean, you just need to have really good martial artists in the movie, just train people with weapons really well, choreograph it really well. Enter the Dragon just goes to show that you don't need all this high tech stuff in order to make a good action movie. And it really goes to show too just how much better martial art films without all the wiring and CGI and green screen like a lot of current martial art films are. 47 Ronin, I'm looking at you. Um, Enter the Dragon, I mean, great movie. If you love Bruce Lee, if you love martial arts, if you want to see kind of what really, really good martial art films look like, Enter the Dragon is your film for sure. At number 2, we have Rocky, the original. What more can I say about this movie? I mean, it's so inspirational. It goes to show that, even if you don't win something, are you at least happy with the person you are? I love the chemistry between Rocky and Adrian in this. Stallone, this is one of his first big movies. Definitely put him on the map after this one. Just such a great. It's just one of those movies where like everything about it is great. There isn't a single flaw with it. I don't think. I mean, it's just such a great movie. And at number 1, and this will definitely give it away. I'm gonna play a small little tune here, and let's see if you can all guess what my number 1 favorite '70s film is. Can you guess it? So if you weren't able to guess it, I'm sure most of you are able to guess it right. My number 1 favorite '70s film is Jaws. You look up Jaws anywhere on the internet, it's going to tell you it defined what summer blockbusters were. It almost started the summer blockbuster season. So many people flocked to the theater to go see this thing, my parents included. I mean, it's such a great. This is another film too where it goes to show you don't need all this CGI, all this green screen. Just get a good mechanical shark and you got yourself a good shark movie. Just make sure it's filmed well. Make sure you do something interesting. Do good perspective shots like they did in the opening with the shark in the water looking up. And this film, I mean, just defines what summer blockbusters should look like. It's smart, it's well filmed, the shark effects are believable in many scenes. Um, I understood the shark broke down a lot during production, but I mean, Steven Spielberg did everything in his power to make sure that you thought that you were seeing a real shark on the screen in this movie. Roy Schneider was great in this. Roy Scheider, however you ever pronounce it. Richard Dreyfuss was great. Robert Shaw was great. Lorraine Gary. Such a great, great movie. That makes my number one. So I hope you guys enjoyed the list. What are some of your favorite films from the 1970s? List them down below if you want. These are my favorite, and like I said, I ranked them based off of now not only how much do I like these films, but how much do they mean to me as far as what defines 1970s cinema for me. So that was my top 10 for the 70s. Stay tuned for top 10 favorites of the 1980s and my top 10 favorite for the 1990s.